What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Game Plan T1D Podcast. This is your host, Sam Benger. Thanks for tuning in this week. I think we have an amazing episode for you. I had just one of the most fascinating conversations with swimmer Jim Edwards. I'll go on to read a bit about Jim's accomplishments in a minute here, but I just wanted to give our listeners a background on the fact that Jim was diagnosed at age 12 back in 1958. So this episode really dives into just how far the medical field has come in terms of treating diabetes. And what I found was so inspiring and moving was what Jim accomplished despite the treatment technologies available to him at that time. It's really astounding. To give you a bit more background on what Jim's career was like, he began swimming in his teen years, and he joined an AAU team at around age 15, just at his local YMCA. So it was around this time that he was diagnosed at age 12. And despite his type 1 diabetes, he went on to attend Williston Academy Prep School in East Hampton, Massachusetts for 2 years, where he was a 12-time All-American swimmer in 6 different events: the 50, 100, 200, 400 free, 200 relay, and 400 relay. And he also set 10 national records there, while also serving as a co-captain of the team. Jim was twice voted the New Hampshire Male Athlete of the Year and appeared in Sports Illustrated. He also competed in the 1964 U.S. Olympic trial, where he missed the Olympic team by 0.1 seconds. What I found perhaps most fascinating was some of Jim's travel when he was on a U.S. State Department squad that competed in Germany in 1966, where they finished third in the 100 free, second in the 400 medley relay, and sixth in the 400 free. We talked about some of Jim's travel during this time while he was on this State Department team and traveling to Wales, Portugal, Spain, and Monte Carlo, just doing amazing things in the pool. Jim would go on to attend the University of North Carolina, where he set American records in the 110 free, in the 4x200 relay, and a world record as the anchor of the 440-yard free relay. Once again, Jim led the team as a tri-captain. Now, after school, Jim went on to set national records at the Masters Outdoor National Championship as well. Again, I think you guys are going to love this episode. There were several points in our conversation where my jaw just dropped listening to what Jim had to persevere through in terms of treatment with diabetes and just how far we've come. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Jim Edwards. Well, with that, why don't we get started? Welcome to the Game Plan T1D Podcast. This is your host, Sam Benger, and today we're going to be sitting down with Jim Edwards. Jim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Sam. How are you doing?
Doing very well. So, talk to us a little bit about how you got started in swimming, and when you started to realize that was a passion for you.
Sure. It was before I was 15. I swam in several Boy Scout meets where the Boy Scouts of the team, or the Boy Scouts troops of the teams that were in, or the troops that were in Manchester, New Hampshire, where I started swimming, were swimming against each other. And I realized then that, hey, this is fun. You can get in here. We can do this. We can enjoy the idea of camaraderie and competing against one another. And why don't I try and pursue it further? And I was asked to join the AAU club that was stationed at the Y. And the AAU club swam in a 15-yard pool. Wow. And the normal size of pools for we in the United States indoors are 25 yards. So we would have to swim an odd length to make 100 yards, an odd number of lengths of the pool to make 100 yards. And it didn't really convert until such time as we got a bigger pool. Point is, I was hooked. And I had some of my friends, and we walked down from high school every day and go to the Y and swim or do our swim practice. And why I got hooked, I can't tell you, other than the fact that I spent my summers on Lake Winnipesaukee growing up, and that's in central part of the Lakes region in New Hampshire, and that was great fun. And eventually I set up a 50-meter course in the lake to swim in and get the 50-meter outdoor pool length in. So it fed on itself, and I did it and realized that it was more than just fun anymore. It was truly a passion.
Mm-hmm. And just starting out, like you mentioned, before the age of 15, I imagine just kind of messing around, racing with friends here and there. Were people able to see early on, and did they ever tell you, hey, Jim, you're pretty good at this? Or was it kind of a self-realization that, this is my passion, and I think I have some potential to do some serious accomplishments in this sport?
You bring up a good point. And my whole game plan at that age wasn't a game plan. It was, all right, I can't beat the guys. I'm not good enough. So let's try and beat the girls first. So
good tactic.
That's exactly what I did. And I tried and finally was able to do that, and then became on that team a fairly good sprinter. And that's how I positioned myself in getting better. It was just these incremental goals that got you going.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking about you starting your swimming career around the age of 15, have been swimming kind of throughout your childhood, it sounds like. And then at the same time, we have a pretty serious incident in your diagnosis at age 12.
Yes.
For our audience, the year was 1958. I wanted to get your take not only on your personal kind of gut reaction to that news, but also what was the opinion of the medical field at that point of time in 1958 on a life ahead with type 1 diabetes?
Good question. We lived in Manchester, New Hampshire at the time, and my brother, who was 2 years younger than I, had gotten the disease at 6 years old, and I got it when I was 12. My parents had to live with it then, so that it was, for me to get it was a shock, yes, especially for my father. Because now here's two people that my mother is going to have to weigh our food, which she did constantly in grams, and subscribe to the diets that the Jocelyn Clinic, where I went and spent a week getting adjusted initially, and where I would go back to every 6 months and talk to Dr. Priscilla White, which was one of the original doctors there, and then I was also fortunate enough to meet Dr. Jocelyn himself, and wow. It was quite a learning experience. Now, how it impacted me, what they thought of in those days, they didn't share with us. I truly thought that I would be okay, but I'd also heard the horror stories. We don't have a long life, and you better make the most of it. And so that's what, again, motivated me once I got into swimming. It was the idea of hey, take a day at a time, and do the best you possibly can, and you'll survive. So, and it turns out I did. My brother did. He died at 43, and I was 45 at the time, and he died because of the disease.
Wow.
So it was unfortunate, but it happens. And when you abuse the disease, like my brother unfortunately did, you end up paying the consequences. And I still was very active, and he wasn't as active and wasn't as good with his dietary restrictions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a very fine line we walk. Even the people that are very active, like yourself, you know, all it takes sometimes is one lapse in judgment, whether it's with insulin or something you eat that can really put diabetics in a dangerous situation. You mentioned at the time that you were following a diet prescribed by Jocelyn. Do you recall what that diet consisted of?
Well, it changed throughout the years, but no, I really don't, because we both weighed and used a measuring cup to decide how much the carbohydrates, for instance, mashed potatoes, what kind of carbohydrate amount is that, a quarter cup or half cup, to meet and they tell you at Jocelyn, the dietitian would tell you, well, this is what it means in the form of measurement. Since this is the way we count our intake of carbohydrates weren't even considered in those days. It was all caloric and weight and a good mix of protein, carbohydrate, and fat. So I lost a considerable amount of weight when I first was diagnosed, and I had a blood sugar of 500 plus. But my parents were quick to realize that this is what was going on, and so they got me to the hospital.
Wow. And I loved what you said earlier about the realization that sometimes, or at least at that point in 1958, doctors thought there's a risk you may have a shorter life. And you said, that just means I have to go and make the most of it. So going forward from that diagnosis, as an athlete, as a competitor, what was the system of management you developed? And talk to us about the mindset that you adopted. It certainly sounded like the diagnosis was almost a motivation to encourage you to go and really pursue swimming and athletics even more than you had been before.
Sam, it's odd, but when you first start out and you swim so much and you think, okay, now, am I tired right now? Do I need something to eat right now, like sugar, to bolster myself? Well, we didn't test with blood sugar. We tested with urine strips. And urine strips told us, as we know today, Zippo. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I made the mistake of having a candy bar during a meet, and not realizing that the candy bar would probably raise my blood sugar, cause me to become more lactic acid prone and fail at whatever I'm doing. Now, the fact that I was young and the fact that I was on a DVI, which is an oral form of diabetic control back then, pill, and I was on 2 different dosages of that pill a day. So that means that my pancreas was still producing some insulin. So I was able to perform better in those earlier years than I did my later years. And that's what got me to really focus on that and realize that it was the shape I was in that counted, not the fact that I needed something to eat necessarily. But that was a guessing game.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Purely guess.
And I think what's particularly fascinating about your story and the timing of your story is, as athletes, diabetic athletes, we're so dialed into our blood sugar because we understand how it impacts our performance.
Yes.
And for example, today, I played college football from 2014 to 2018, and I was acutely aware of where my blood sugar was every 5 minutes per reading from a CGM. And to
Right.
think of and to talk about your accomplishments and what you were able to do with, the technology at the time being those urine sticks, it's hard to fathom how you were able to do that, and just outside of that, how far the diabetes community has come in terms of treatment.
All right. I shake my head every day, Sam, going, what if I had this?
Mm-hmm.
What could I have done? Would I have been a 10th faster in 1964 to make the Olympic team? Absolutely. But I wasn't, and I didn't. and the fact is that and this will amuse you because you may not even have heard of this, but with the urine sticks they didn't exist in 1958. What existed was this solution, this blue solution, that my poor mother had to put in a what do you call it? A test tube
Mm-hmm.
on the stove, boil it, and put 4 drops of urine in one that was mine and 4 drops that was my brother's, in order to get the blue solution to change color and tell our urine sugar, which again didn't mean very much back then, but that was the only thing we had.
It's hard, and I imagine it'll be hard for our younger listeners to just understand how difficult that must have been. And the other thing too is, so you take the time to boil the solution or boil the water, and then you drop in a urine sample, and by that time your blood sugar is probably already likely changed. So however accurate the test
absolutely.
was in the first place, it's compounded by the fact that this was 15, 20, half an hour has passed since you took that sample. So again, it's just crazy to think of how far the treatments come. But clearly, despite those things, you were able to carry on despite that burden. And I wanted to talk about you going to the Williston School, and
all right,
just how, my understanding is that it's a boarding school, like a boarding high school. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's a preparatory school in East Hampton, Massachusetts.
Yeah. So and I was talking to my parents about this, just what was the relationship like with your parents in sending you to a place where they were putting a lot of faith in you to be independent in your management of your diabetes?
That's another good question. I was, at the time, I was very cognizant, not as cognizant as I am today, very cognizant of how important diet was, and it was suggested to us by the coach at Williams College that we try Williston because of the coach and the reputation that the school had. And I had been swimming for 2 years, and I had gotten some notoriety by then in New England. And so I went ahead and we went down, we visited the coach, and the coach was a fairly analytical man by the name of Babcock. And he was actually the head of the business of the school, ran the business section, the money section of the school, and got me a job, which nobody else had this, of working in the food area, the food preparatory area for the school, so that I could get the precise amounts of food that I needed and the types of food that I needed, and stay away from the stuff that was sugared, so that I could in essence survive, not get fat, and be prepared for whatever the day would offer me. And that's where I really learned that the type of things like diet. We were doing Clinitest then, and that's, again, a urine sugar. And we still hadn't started with the blood sugars. So it was the old butter dish, and inside the butter dish in the morning was a glass syringe with a stainless steel needle and pork insulin. And none of this Humalog, none of this Novolog. It was all pork insulin, and it was just that is, you can look at that and say, hey, that's improper too. Sure it was, but it was all we had. It's how you lived, and that's what went on at Williston. Then we worked out in the afternoon, and I typically worked out again right after dinner, and went on to do a pretty good job at Williston my junior and senior year.
Wow. And just to clarify, so that syringe, the stainless steel syringe, was that, I'm assuming it was not as...
I'm sorry, it wasn't it was a stainless steel needle and a glass syringe.
So that was not disposable. That was, you were using that on a daily basis?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Until you couldn't handle the and the pork insulin would cause divots in your leg, and that's where we give ourselves the shots most of the time. So the pork insulin, because it was so impure, would give you those hollow points in your legs. When we started using more of the Humalog or the Novolog, we were better off because it was pure, and it gave us a better margin of safety too, because it was human.
Wow, this is. I'm just genuinely shocked by these details and just how far the treatments come, and not only that, but how you endured those things. So I introduced you prior to our conversation and talked a little bit about some of the accomplishments and records you were able to set, but just to recap your 2 years at Williston, and give our audience again an appreciation of what you're able to do there, despite using pork insulin and a glass syringe and a stainless steel needle. From 63 to 65, you set 10 national prep records, 12 All-American recognitions in 6 events, voted twice the New Hampshire Athlete of the Year, competed in the 64 Olympic trials. You appeared in Sports Illustrated. You were setting American and world records in addition to being a captain on the Williston team. But I did want to ask, it also notes that you competed in Wales, Spain, Portugal, and Monte Carlo. What was that experience like, being able to travel at that age?
Oh, boy. It was interesting. I made a team as a result of the 1965 outdoor AAU results. I made a team that traveled all over Europe. I was, I guess, fourth in the 100-yard free or 100-meter free, or third in the 100-meter free. Yeah, and then fourth in the 200-meter free, and that enabled me. The first team was the first 2 people. They went to the World Student Games, one place. We went to all those different places. So the traveling Europe, the Wales is where we set the world record, and I set the American record for the 4x440 freestyle relay, and I set the 110 because I led it off. So, and that was the American record that I set there. Spain, we went to Bilbao, and Portugal was Lisbon, and we had to get the starts down. The starts were funny because they give you in their language what to take your mark and then bang. And so we to this day I remember Fertiche, and that's take your marks in Portuguese. Monte Carlo was the height of the trip. And I'll tell you why. Monte Carlo, I have a picture on my desk. And the picture is of Prince Albert, who is the current Prince of Monte Carlo. And I have a picture of him when he was 6, and he's in his Speedo, and I'm in my Speedo, and we're in the palace, and we're in the side where the pool is. We ate there, and we met Princess Grace and Prince Rainier, and they gave us this fish on a platter outside, and these huge utensils, and it was just a dream come true. I mean, you couldn't ever have thought to be on a trip where you met these people who you'd seen in movies before, and just a marvelous time. And it was great. I really learned a lot then. Learned a lot about growing up. Learned a lot about how other people live, what foreign countries are like. We were invited in Wales. We were invited to the castle that the mayor lived in, and we got these. I still have the very, very original and hand done invitations to each of the swimmers on the team. We had 23 swimmers, I think, on the team, and half of them women and half men, and just a neat time. If you can ever make a team like that, and have some of the travels that I've had both there and in Germany, it's more than worthwhile. It's absolutely experiential learning like that is absolutely the way learning should be. I mean, it's just you're there, you're living it.
Wow, that sounds like an adventure if I have ever heard one. But it's funny how
well, you haven't heard the good stories and I'm not going to tell you those.
Well, I did want to ask. You're in Monte Carlo. You're in all of these exotic places. Are you still carrying around the the syringe in your pocket there, or what? How were you able to manage your diabetes as you're kind of traversing Europe?
Okay, I had a stainless steel syringe-shaped gizmo that held the syringe along with the needle. And in those days, we started to have disposable needles. So use one, throw it away. So it was a lot easier, and they were wrapped up individually. Mm-hmm. But there was a rubber top to that stainless steel looking syringe looking thing, and I put alcohol in it. So that's how I kept it clean. And then I had the disposable alcohol wipes that I used to make certain that I was sterile on my skin where I gave myself a shot. So that's kind of what went on.
And were you monitoring your blood sugar at this time in addition to the shots?
No. Still wasn't forthcoming in. No, it was after school when I started using when I started using blood sugar, real blood sugar taking. It was a long time. All of the diabetics today need to realize that your predecessors lived a very, very stark, untechnical, in an untechnical world. And once it started to develop, once I don't know, I'm on the mini-med pump. Once the mini-med people started, they were just going whole hog. And I think they were the first pump manufacturer. But the person that really developed the pump was a guy in Manchester, New Hampshire, who developed the first pump, which was the size of a woman's small purse. And it was was the same guy that developed the Segway. And so and that took off a great deal. And that was in the 90s when he developed, I started the pump in the 90s. So he developed that, I think, in the 80s.
Wow.
So pumps have not been around that long.
No,
really.
It's every day, more and more, and especially in speaking with you, I am thankful for when I was born and when I was diagnosed. But
yeah.
I talked a little bit about this with Chris Freeman, who was on the last episode of the podcast. Chris is,
right.
for those of our listeners that don't know, a 4-time Olympic cross-country skier, so a particularly grueling sport. He said he was sort of able to develop a personal system where he could discern feelings of just general fatigue that everyone feels versus low blood sugar. When you were abroad and just in general and competing, in not having accurate blood sugar testing or CGM or anything even remotely close to that, were you able to sort of distinguish between general fatigue and a legitimate low blood sugar episode?
Yes. And here's why. Before you compete, adrenaline flows. And Chris was truly a great athlete, an amazing athlete, in that he can keep going for kilometers and kilometers and kilometers. I never did that. The most I ever swam was 400 meters or 500 yards, and I swam a 1650 once. But I tell you what, the ones that got me most excited, where the adrenaline builds up inside you, that's when your sugar goes out of control. Mm. And and I learned throughout the years, and with particularly my coach at North Carolina, that I can control that in part by doing more work actually during the meet. So he'd have me working out during the meet, doing 10 100s freestyle with 10 seconds rest before my events, so that the adrenaline buildup was mitigated by that work, and I wouldn't get as excited with it. And you build up the adrenaline, your blood sugar goes high, your lactic acid, you're prone then to quicker lactic acid buildup, and therefore you get fatigued a lot easier in a race. So wow. I learned that a little bit when I was swimming in prep school, but a lot more when I was in college, and learning more about how you can mitigate your feelings, the adrenaline and the lactic acid buildup by some work beforehand. For instance, if I were in a 100-meter freestyle race, and there were a 400-meter freestyle, there was a 400-meter freestyle race beforehand, say a half hour, I'd go in that. And the logic of going that is to burn through, is to calm yourself down, get yourself to the point where you're able to sprint and swim your 100-meter race, and you have controlled your adrenaline flow and are able to do better in the 100-meter race. So I wasn't doing tests, I wasn't doing anything but understanding my body to the point where you can help to mitigate the negative effects of higher sugar by working harder at the beginning.
It's so interesting. I love strategies such as that one that are organic in nature and can still bring down our blood sugar and stabilize our blood sugar without the use of artificial drugs like insulin. And I know Chris talked earlier or on the last podcast about how pre-race he kind of developed his own breathing technique, in that he could literally see, as he's breathing over the course of 5 to 10 minutes, his blood sugar on his CGM go from rising to plateauing to eventually starting to come back down. And I just think similar to your strategy, that it's so great to see we can do things to stabilize our blood sugar by just, like you said, knowing our bodies.
Yes, no question about that. And it takes a lot of time to recognize that you're not like the other person in the pool. You have things that can hold you back, and you have other things that can absolutely help you in the form of regulating yourself better. And that's what I depended on. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great point too. I really think sometimes in athletics, being a type 1 diabetic obviously comes with challenges, but at the same time, we're forced from the point of our diagnosis to become much more acquainted with our body and how it functions. Everything from dealing with adrenaline, like we were just talking about, to, all right, what specifically am I putting in my body to fuel it, and how does my body respond to those different nutrients? So I think in some ways, dealing with type 1 diabetes can almost be a blessing in disguise for diabetic athletes.
There is absolutely no question about that, because you have to learn more about who you are and how your body reacts. And if you can do that, you can control it better.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk about, so we've talked about some of the success at Williston, some of the highs, and now I want to come to what I would assume was a massive learning experience for you. I wanted to talk about the Olympic trials, where you came up a tenth of a second short of qualifying for a trip to the Olympics. Obviously, you've overcome a lot of adversity throughout your life, but how were you able to internalize this experience, learn from it, and bounce back?
Okay. I was 17 years old, and it was in between my junior and senior year at Williston. And we were at the Astoria Pool in New York City for the Olympic trials. And every hot swimmer in the United States was there. And I was swimming the 100, 200, and 400 meter freestyles. The 100 was a fairly quick race. You're down and back. And the 200 is the one that I missed by a tenth. Now, the interesting part was a fellow by the name of Mike Wall and I were in the trials together in that event. And I beat him by a tenth of a second in the trials. So he and I went to the finals. And he was in lane 2 and I was in lane 6. So we didn't see each other like we did in the heats. So I went out and did my pre-race strategy is typically to go out fast and come back as hard as I can on the second 100. And he beat me in the finals by a tenth of a second, and he went to the Olympics and got a gold medal in the 4x200 relay. Obviously, I didn't go. Now, what did I think of that? Well, I'm a fairly positive guy, so I thought, well, I have 4 more years. I'm going to be in my peak. I'm ready. Mm-hmm. I'll make the 68 and go to Mexico. Well, as it was, I didn't make the 68. I got sick. I had the best summer of my life in the water, but I got sick from overwork, and ended up in the school in University of North Carolina's hospital, and was recovering from that while they did the trials in Long Beach, California. But it really didn't affect me at 17 as much as it did by not even making the trip at 21, because I thought I was in better shape even at 21.
So looking back now, what is your takeaway from that experience? What can you say you learned as a result?
by not making the team?
Yeah, by coming up short in the 64 trials.
I didn't. Yeah, it was like any other meet. You won some, and sometimes you didn't. And I think my parents and my grandparents and my aunt, who all attended the meet, were more devastated than I was. But I figured 4 more years, man, I'm going to be ready. So
yeah.
look out, world, here I come. Yep.
Absolutely.
The only way you can do it.
So you mentioned UNC and moving on to your college years. What was the college experience like after such a unique time at Williston?
Well, let's call a spade here. I had the best 3 years of my life swimming when I was a junior at Williston, a senior at Williston, and a freshman at Chapel Hill. Now, why were they the best 3 years of my life? I came into Chapel Hill as a freshman. We had 28 All-American swimmers, All-American high school swimmers that came in with my freshman class. And in those days, freshmen didn't swim on the varsity team. We did swim meets with Michigan State. They were called telegraph meets, where we'd swim in our pool and they'd swim in theirs, and we'd telegraph the times, and the winner was the winner. And we won. We set tons of both school records and several U.S. records for freshmen because of the depth of talent. That was the positive side. The negative side was the fact that there was so much competition. A lot of these 28 guys were the big fish in their pools back in high school, and now we're all of a sudden not big fish at all. Mm-hmm. And it discouraged them. So by our sophomore year, we lost some of them, and it even by our junior year, we lost more. So it was something that I'll never forget. It was, and when I say that the freshman year was probably the peak of my career, I'm not saying that my sophomore, junior, and senior years were any less of a peak, because I didn't fall off in my swimming at times, but I didn't improve. And one of the reasons I didn't improve is because I think I didn't get a real good handle on all of this adrenaline buildup until later, maybe my junior year, when I could control it a little bit better. But boy, it took so much time of learning and took it away from my ability to improve. So, and had I had a continuous glucose monitor, I would have been able to control that one heck of a lot better. But they didn't have those back then. They didn't even have the blood tests back then. So, except when you went to the doctor.
Was the process of understanding the adrenaline spike and then dealing with it, was that more a personal process, or was that something you did with the team and with team trainers or with personal doctors? What was the support network like for you during that process?
Well, it consisted of a physiologist by the name of Dr. Pat Erie, who was our coach, and we didn't really have trainers back then. We might have had a few athletic trainers that helped us in off-season work, but that was about all. And he understood the physiology of the diabetes. He didn't explain it to me, but that's one of the reasons in the ACC championships, he made me swim 10 100s before any big event, because he knew that would mitigate or ease some of the stress that the adrenaline was putting on me, and would make it so that I could swim better times, and I did. But that is something that came later. in my college career. You know, I was better than halfway through, and it just that's the way it goes. And in a big meet like NCAA championships that we'd go to every year, you can't do that because the pool's not big enough. It's usually simple 8-lane, 25-yard pool, and the lanes are available for the particular event right then, and they aren't available for a person to be swimming like Pat wanted me to swim. So that's kind of the way it went.
Did you try to transition when that pool space wasn't available to a different method of controlling the adrenaline, perhaps, breathing or meditating
diving well was
like that?
The diving well was often open at that point in time, so you could use a diving well for swimming down, or after you've raced. It was, or even before you raced, because there's a lot of time between races, so you could use that. But it wasn't nearly as efficient as using the regular pool, doing prescribed amount, and having a watch on you. And that's what my coach used to do. But nowadays the pools are so advanced that there's always another pool on the campus that you could use for that sort of thing.
So we've talked a lot about different career accomplishments, but I wanted to get your take on what you felt was the accomplishment, or perhaps the record, or relay team even, that you were most proud to be a part of or to be associated with.
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that I was on a world record-breaking 4x110-yard freestyle relay team. That was guys from USC, Villanova, UC Berkeley, and myself, and we got together as a result of how well we did in our nationals, outdoor nationals, and in Wales we swam this event and did that. And in 1965, I had made the best world times list and was ranked 5th in the world in the 100-meter freestyle and 6th in the world in the 200-meter freestyle. And I couldn't. These were events these two events took place in Maumee, Ohio, right outside of Toledo, when we had our outdoor 65 outdoor championships in a 50-meter pool. And and the other people that made this ranking did it all over the world. So being able to be with the people, the individuals that helped them set these individual times, and then you're being among them, is just, I looked at that and I said, okay, that's got to be a peak. That's got to be something that I'll never forget, and I never have.
In your mind, it's funny, my background has been I played a lot of sports growing up, but it was always football, and college football was really where I kind of found my athletic passion. That was the sport for me, and I've always kind of viewed swimming as an individual sport. Do you have a preference on the events that you look back on? I know you just mentioned the relay team, but did you prefer to compete as part of a group like that? And how did that compare to competing as an individual?
Well, Sam, I always did better as a relay participant. And it's odd, but when you're dependent on 3 other people and you're on the relay too, you don't want to let them down, because you're there for a reason. You're there to win and or place as high as you can. And this, I've been in many circumstances where I've swum a split time, and admittedly it was start that was enabled by getting off of the block in a fairly fluid motion. Before you didn't have to go by a gun. You went by the guy's hand that was hitting in front of you, and who's on your team that was a predecessor swimmer. And I always was psyched for those sort of events. But that doesn't take away from the excitement I got from really getting out there and swimming individual events as well. All of them got me going. It got me verbally going and physically going, because I remember one time very clearly. I went up to my high school, my Williston team members in the New England Prep Championships, and they were the last event. And for us to be able to place first in the New Englands, we had to win the event. It was not our number one team. We had already swum our individual events, and we had a limit of 2 events you could swim. This was a team that had swum before and was good, but they were not our best. So I went up to them before they took off, and I said to them, "Fellas, I've got faith in you. So you know that you can win this. You know that there's nobody in this pool that's going to beat you." And they won. And
wow.
To this day, I get people from that team coming up to me and saying, "I'm so glad you said that, because it got us psyched, and we blew them away." And that was part of the fun too. The coaching aspect, the psyching up aspect of getting people to do things maybe they had never done before, but were able to listen to somebody other than their coach and really get enabled by it.
What a story. I mean, that's
Yeah.
That's really at the core of what athletics and competitive sports is all about, is, like you mentioned, pushing people beyond what they thought was possible. And, you know, you have that underdog team just shock everybody.
That's amen on that.
So, again, I wanted to revisit this idea. You've mentioned you're on an insulin pump now, and you're checking your blood sugar multiple times a day. What sort of emotions do you have looking back on what you're able to do, given the limitations of diabetes treatment at your time during your swimming career? Is it bittersweet in some ways? I certainly think there would be a fair deal of pride there in saying, you know, look at what I was able to do despite having to use pork insulin, despite having to use urine sticks, despite having to use what we would now consider, you know, certainly outdated diabetes treatment. What are some of the feelings?
That's a good one. First of all, I'm not upset at all about what I wasn't able to do. I was able to accomplish during the time I was swimming, and I was the only diabetic I knew that was swimming in the country at the time at my level, and I accomplished a great many things. And I shared this spreadsheet that I gave to you with my wife, and she looked at it and she said, "Wow, you accomplished so much." And I said, "Well, I worked hard at it. There's no doubt about that." And there was certainly some natural ability on my part to do something there versus playing football or basketball or that sort of thing. And she understood that, but she see it on one page. She said, I still can't believe you were able to do that." And I said, "Well, you know, it took a lot of time. I mean, from 58 to 40, when I was to 1958 to when I was 44, and that would have been 12 to 44. It would have been 32 years. I swam, and I I swim in different age groups, and I experienced the highs and the lows, and that was okay. You learn to live with that. It's a matter of don't compare yourself today with what you were 20 years ago. It's impossible. Compare yourself with what you believe you can do today. And a lot of people have tried different events, and they get away from comparing themselves because they're trying something totally different. And that's fine too. The fact is you're exercising, you're feeling good about it. And that's what you should be doing, focusing on that level, on that thought process.
Wow. That is some powerful insight and powerful advice. I love what you said about why compare yourself to the person you were 20 years ago. It's A, it's in the past, and B, it's detrimental to what you're trying to become going forward. I think, and I'm sure you would agree with this, it's a daily process of getting better, and trying to be your best self.
Absolutely.
So Oh, go ahead.
Well, if I were to say one thing to the current people who are trying to manage their diabetes, learn to manage it. Don't look at your diabetes as something that's going to keep you back. Look at it as an opportunity for you to improve in the manner in which you are human. Look for ways you can do better on a day-to-day basis, both from an eating perspective, from an exercise perspective, and from the testing and insulin intake perspective. There's always room for improvement. And by knowing that and by practicing it, you're going to live longer and you're going to be happier because you will have achieved those little ticks of improvement every day and learn how your body's going to react. And that's important for you.
I think the other thing that comes with learning to manage your diabetes and opportunity is that if you do a good enough job of it, you have a chance to be a massive inspiration to countless other diabetics and to countless other people with other chronic illnesses, with other adversities in their life, because they're looking at you and saying they're not letting this disease, this roadblock get in their way. So I couldn't agree more with what you said. And that was actually my next question. So you answered it perfectly.
Okay.
But yeah, Jim Edwards, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. This was one of the more fascinating conversations that I think I've ever had with a fellow diabetic.
Thank you, Sam. And my name is Jim Edwards. I have type 1 diabetes, and I have a game plan, my friends.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Game Plan T1D podcast. For related content, please visit www.gameplant1d.com or follow us on social media at Game Plan T1D. Find your game plan.